Welcome to Mount Koya, or as they say in Japanese, Koya-san, and you'll hear that quite a lot during today's virtual tour. My name is Robert, and I'm one of the insiders with Inside Japan Tours, and today I am joined with Richard, who's currently behind the camera, and together we'd like to take you on a journey through Mount Koya, which is currently one of the most important religious sites of Japan, and has been designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So, without further ado, let's get cracking. So, as part of the Mount Koya area as virtual tour, we'll be looking at three very distinct parts of the area. The first one is just at the end of this path, and it's called Danjo Garan, and it is the monastery complex of this area. And then later on in today's virtual tour, we'll be looking at a place called Okunoin, which is a cemetery. And to get to the cemetery, there is a beautiful 2-kilometer path lined with these towering cedar trees. It's a very picturesque place, and so we'll be looking at that later on. And then also, as part of today's tour, we'll be looking at what it's like to stay in a Shukubo, or a Buddhist temple lodging. I'll just pass you quickly now over to Richard.
Hello, I'll just say hi. My name's Richard Farmer. And yes, Mount Koya, what a wonderful place. And I just want to start right from the very beginning with clearing up a bit of a misconception about Mount Koya, which I've encountered a lot. Many people, and many guidebooks even, refer to Mount Koya as the headquarters of Shingon Buddhism. Shingon being a sect of Buddhism in Japan. But this is not quite true. So in the early 9th century, when Kukai, a monk, also called Kobo Daishi, his posthumous name, founded this temple, it's true to say that Mount Koya was the headquarters of this new sect of Buddhism that he founded. But actually in the centuries following his death, the Shingon school of Buddhism split into various sub-sects, each with their own head temples. And Koya-san remains the home of one of those subsects of Shingon Buddhism called Koya-san Shingon. But actually there are around 15 or 16 other subsects of Shingon Buddhism. For example, the Buzan-ha, the Chisan-ha, the Daikakuji-ha. These are all subsects and each have their own head temple. And many of those subsects and the headquarter temples are located within the city of Kyoto, which is about 3 or 4 hours by train from here, from Mount Koya. But the priests at those various subsect head temples will be quite upset if you refer to Koya-san as the headquarters of Shingon, because they have their own headquarter temple, which is the headquarters of their subsect. So Mount Koya, the headquarters of Koya-san Shingon. I'm quite interested in Buddhist administration, so this is something I'm a bit of a stickler about. And so I mentioned Kukai, Kobo Daishi, his posthumous name, this very, very important figure in Japanese history, and especially for the history of Buddhism and Shingon Buddhism in Japan. So he was alive at the beginning of the 9th century. And Buddhism, at this point, had already been around in Japan for a good 300 or 400 years, and so was well established. And Kukai was sent on a mission to China by boat, a quite dangerous journey at the time, to go to China and study more about Buddhism and bring back those teachings. And he was actually sent on a mission that was meant to last 10 years or more. And he was given a stipend, a budget for his long stay there, but actually he came back after just 2 years and had actually spent all of his money, all of that 10 years worth of money, going crazy doing Buddhist shopping, something that I can sympathize with. I go a little bit crazy at temple gift shops. And he'd bought things like Buddhist sculpture, sutras, Buddhist texts, paintings, mandalas, ritual implements, and brought all of those back with him to Japan, and claimed that he had already learnt everything he needed to in just 2 years. He didn't need that extra time. And he came back here, having discovered this new type of Buddhism that had begun in China, which in Japanese is known as Shingon, true word Buddhism. And that's the type of Buddhism that he brought back with him and founded as a new sect in Japan here on Mount Koya.
So as we're walking up this path into the main part of this complex, I just wanted to point out this building that you can see here just on the left. And so this particular building, some people might consider to be the most important building of this whole area. And the reason being is that, as with many historical and religious sites in Japan, most of those buildings are made out of wood. There have been numerous incidents of these places burning down, and Koya-san, or this particular area here rather, is no exception to that. These buildings have burnt down, but this one in particular is the oldest building on this complex, dating back to the 12th century, and inside houses Richard's most favourite deity of them all in Buddhism, the Fudo Myo. And if you watch some of our other tours before on YouTube, for example, Richard has given quite a lot of in-depth explanation about the Fudo Myo, so do take a look. But this also has been designated a national treasure in Japan as well. And then just beyond this building here, you can probably see quite a picturesque pond, and I won't talk too much about the pond just yet, but please do keep this pond in mind later, because I have quite an interesting story about it relating to another building.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Fudo Myo, this esoteric Buddhist deity. But unfortunately, this National Treasure building, it's only opened very, very rarely for the public to see inside. There's no set schedule, but maybe once for a couple of days every 5 or 6 years. So if you happen to see this building open when you come to Mount Koya, you are incredibly, incredibly lucky. And then you can just see ahead of us this incredibly striking building, perhaps the most visually striking building in this Danjo-Garang complex. And this is the Konpon Daito Pagoda, the central pagoda in the complex. And I'm afraid that we can't go inside. It's not possible to take video or photographs inside the pagoda. But if you come to Mount Koya, you can pay just a couple of hundred yen and you can go inside. And inside you will see a kind of 3D mandala. Basically a set of 5 very large statues of Buddhas. And in the center is the most important one, a Buddha called Dainichi Nyorai, the Great Buddha of the Sun, surrounded by 4 other Buddhas. And and this is like a kind of 3D mandala. And this word mandala, it's become quite common in English, especially if people are familiar with Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism. Maybe if you've been to Tibet, you might have even seen mandalas, or the kind of sand mandalas that often Tibetan monks create. And in Shingon Buddhism, they're quite similar. These 2D graphic representations of the Buddhist cosmos. But inside here, you can see a kind of 3D version of that, showing actual Buddhist statues, but using the same kind of layout that is used in Shingon mandalas. And there are actually 2 mandalas that are most important in Shingon Buddhism. One is called the Taizo Kai, which means the womb world mandala. And the other one is the Kongo Kai, the diamond world mandala. And together these are called the Ryokai, which means the jewel world mandala. Very important in Shingon Buddhism. And it's said that one of the reasons why Kukai chose this area to found his new monastic complex was because he could combine these 2 most important mandalas here. The reason being that although Mount Koya is called Mount Koya, it's not actually a mountain. It's surrounded by mountains, and we are up quite high on a kind of plateau. And then surrounding this plateau are 8 small peaks. And in that Taizokai mandala, the womb world mandala, there's a central court which contains Dainichi Nyorai, the most important Buddha in Shingon, and then 8 lotus petals surround that central court, and each one of those petals contains another Buddhist deity. And so the geographic nature of Mount Koya reflects that womb world mandala. And then this area now, this complex is called Danjogaran, but when Kukai first founded it, it was known as Kongo Buji, which means the Diamond Peak Temple. And so by founding Diamond Peak Temple within this kind of womb realm, he could combine these two mandalas, compassion and knowledge together, a kind of sacralization and mandalization of the kind of local geography.
So earlier I was talking about a building that might be considered as one of the most important buildings, but this one we see in front of us with the gold lanterns hanging off is the most important building of the complex. And the reason behind why this building, called the Miedo, is the most important is because inside, locked away in the building, is a picture, a painting of Kukai himself. It is believed to be a true depiction of Kukai because it was painted when he was alive. And it is so incredibly special that members of the public are not privy to see the painting, nor are most people at Mount Koya. And the only people who can see it are monks who complete their training to become a priest, and only at that point of completion can they go inside and take a look. But then again, it's so incredibly special that is your only one opportunity in your whole life to have a look at this painting. And earlier I was talking about a particular pond that we walked past, and the reason I did so is because I was talking about a lot of the buildings burning down around here, and because this building is so incredibly important, in the early 20th century there was a big fire at this particular area, and the flames got very, very close to this building. I don't know if you can see, but perhaps if you look very closely, the roof made out of shingles, you can sort of see scorch marks just ever so slightly. And they got very, very close. The flames were just licking the building. And what the monks did was they jumped into that pond. And at that time of the year, the pond had an essentially ice sheet over it. It was that cold. But they still jumped in, doused themselves in the water from the pond, and then lay across the roof to protect the building from the fire. So that's how important it is. Even today, it's a little bit hard to see, but this is the only building that has a sprinkler system on the ground all the way around, almost acting like a moat to protect the building in case of fire. And then just in front of this building here is a pine tree. And this pine tree is protected because there is a story about Kukai when he was leaving China on his return to Japan. At the port in China where he was about to depart, he had with him a ritualistic instrument called a vajra. And this instrument has 3 prongs on it. And what he did was he threw this instrument over the sea in the direction of Japan, and he said that wherever this instrument lands is exactly where he will build his monastery. And on arrival to Mount Koya, he noticed that in the pine tree was lodged this particular instrument. And this was seen as a sign that, yes, I should build my monastery at this premise. And in most cases, pine needles have 2 prongs, but sometimes, very rarely, you might find from this particular tree a 3-pronged pine needle, and this is incredibly rare. And it is believed that if you find one of these, if you take it back home with you, it gives you good luck. So what I'm going to try and do now is, there's quite a lot on the floor, is to try and find one of those. So give me 2 seconds. Oh, actually, that was very quick. I think I found one right here. And so here we go. A 3-pronged pine needle. There you go. I'm not hiding it. You can see it's actually joined at the bottom. So if you find one of these, take it back with you for good luck.
Very lucky. There's actually quite a lot on the ground today. More than usual. Like sometimes it's really hard to find them, but especially after it's rained or if it's been quite windy, you can often see them. So yes, today, easy to get good luck. And we've been talking a lot about Shingon Buddhism. But what is Shingon Buddhism, and what makes it different from the other types of Buddhism in Japan? So there are many different types, sects of Buddhism. Perhaps the most well-known outside of Japan is Zen. This word has become very famous, especially thanks to very good publicity, especially in the United States in the 50s and 60s, thanks to the beatniks, who became very involved in Zen movements in the West. But Shingon is less well known. And Shingon is often described in English as esoteric Buddhism, or in Japanese it's called Mikyo, which means secret teachings. And what that means is that many of the teachings in Shingon Buddhism are secretly transmitted from master to disciple. So of course it's possible to buy books in bookshops, and of course all around Mount Koya there's plenty of information available about the history of Shingon Buddhism and the main philosophy and teachings. But within those teachings, certain teachings are only available to the initiated, i.e. to the monastic clergy. And Kukai, the founder of Shingon Buddhism in Japan, described Shingon as a teaching of the three mysteries: the mystery of speech, the mystery of body, and the mystery of mind. And these consist of various practices central to Shingon Buddhism. And just here on the right, you can see the Saito, which means the West Pagoda, another very large pagoda in this area, that also contains a kind of 3D mandala that combines the womb realm and the diamond realm. And so the mystery of speech, this refers to mantras. And mantras are a kind of sacred utterance in the kind of Japanese version of Sanskrit Indian language. And many of these mantras are known by the general public. So there's one Buddha, Yakushi Nyorai, the medicine Buddha. And his mantra goes like this: On koro koro sendari matogi sowaka. On koro koro sendari matogi sowaka. So everyone can know this mantra. But there are certain mantras that are only transmitted from master to disciple. And in ceremonies that priests perform that are attended by the general public, those secret mantras cannot be known to everyone, and so they're kind of muttered under the breath of the priest. So they sound like this. And this is what you'll hear when they're chanting the mantras during the ceremony. And then the mystery of the body refers to mudras, and these are sacred hand gestures. And again, there are mudras that anyone can know about and see. So if you go to a Buddhist temple in Japan, you'll see Buddha statues and they'll be doing various hand gestures. These are mudras. But often they're performed in a kind of sequence. And when they're particularly secret mudras, the priest will perform them under their robes. So you can see them kind of fumbling around under their robes because these mudras cannot be shown to the general public. And then the final mystery, the mystery of the mind, refers to a type of meditation, but a different type of meditation to, for example, Zen Buddhism. It's a kind of visualization meditation, and especially one that involves using those mandalas, depictions of the cosmos, as an aid to those meditations.
So we, quite rightly say, talk quite a lot about Buddhism while we're here. But in front of us at the moment is a Shinto shrine, part of Shintoism, the indigenous religion of Japan. And there is a story about Kukai when he was searching for a place in Japan to build his monastery. He was walking through the mountains nearby, and he was essentially greeted by the manifestations of the gods, or the deity of Mount Koya. And the manifestations were two dogs, one black and one white. And it's quite hard to see on the camera, but just beyond those steps are actually those two dogs, one on either side. And it is believed that those gods, or rather the dogs, guided Kukai over to this particular location and granted him permission to build his monastery here, where we stand today. And it was seen as quite an important part of the process because, it can be seen as perhaps a little bit rude or offensive if, for example, you just went into the mountains and then just built your own temple monastery on the lands that belongs to other deities. And so the idea was that part of that process was that having been granted the permission from those gods, then was he able to build this temple complex. And so actually that shrine to the gods of Mount Koya was the first religious site built on this area before actually the rest of the Buddhist temple complex.
Just here on the right hand side you can see this building with an interesting shape, and this is actually a sutra repository, and it's actually an interactive building. So Robert has just dashed over, there he is, and he's going to demonstrate the way that you interact with this building. So he's going to grab one of these handles just here and give us a good firm push, and you can see it starts to move. The exterior of the building remains stationary, but inside there's a kind of large bookshelf that is rotating as Robert is pushing, and that bookshelf contains a collection of the Buddhist sutras, the main sacred texts in Buddhism. And the idea is that as Robert is exerting himself physically, he's turning those books and absorbing them. And so he has now created the same amount of merit, the same amount of good karma, as if he had actually sat down and read all of those books. So a very handy shortcut to enlightenment. So both a 3-pronged pine needle and reading all of the Buddhist sutras in just 20 minutes. A pretty good day, I would say.
What can I say?
And talking of shortcuts to enlightenment, the next area that we're going to on Mount Koya is a little bit far from here, so we're going to see you there in a few seconds and transport over there, teleport. But just before we do, this is the final place that we'd like to introduce to you in this Danjo Garan complex. This is called the Condor, which means the Golden Hall. And this is the main ritual center on Mount Koya. This is where all of the most important Buddhist ceremonies take place, often at what I call Buddhist o'clock in the morning. The day starts well before sunrise for priests on Mount Koya, and so those ceremonies really do take place very early in the morning, but a very important building within this Danjo Garan complex. And so we'll see you very shortly at our next spot.
Hello and welcome back. Right now we're standing on the main street that connects the Danjo Garan, the monastic complex, all the way through the town that is in Mount Koya up to Okunoin, the cemetery. And so perhaps when we talk about these sort of big religious sites or temple complexes, you probably had the image of it being in the middle of nature. And yes, it is true, but there is a very nice quaint town right here as well that is lined with these really nice small Buddhist shops where you can buy souvenirs and little Buddhist trinkets, for example sort of like the prayer beads or the candles. So if you do come to Mount Koya, I do highly recommend having a walk through this very picturesque town and popping into some of the shops. But right now, where I'm standing is front of the temple lodgings, the Shukubo that we're staying at tonight. And this particular one is called Renge Inn. Renge Inn in English means Lotus Flower Temple, so a beautiful name. So what I'd like to do is take you inside and show you what it's like to stay at a Shukubo.
Yes, so when you stay on Mount Koya, staying at a temple lodging is your only option. So there are no big Western-style hotels with 500 rooms or anything like that on Mount Koya, and I think that's a very, very good thing. If they started building big, modern, monstrous Western-style hotels, it would totally change the atmosphere of Mount Koya. So when you come here and stay, you stay at one of 52 temples that operate as Shukubo temple lodgings. And it is highly recommended to stay here. Even from the nearest big cities like Kyoto and Osaka, it's at least 3 or 4 hours by a variety of different types of transport. You take a train and then a funicular railway to get to the top of Mount Koya. And so it's quite an effort to get here, and so you really don't want to try and do it as a day trip. You'll just spend your whole day on transport and actually have very little time to appreciate being here itself. So staying here is convenient, but also it allows you to experience this unique experience of staying in a Buddhist temple. And so this is ahead of us now the main building of Renge-in itself, the main temple hall. Quite an old building. And that's where in the morning you can join the morning ceremony, which is well worth doing. You have to get up a little bit early, usually about 6 o'clock in the morning, but you can see the head priest doing the morning ceremony and chanting. Well worth doing. And then that's joined along this corridor to this slightly more modern looking building on the left hand side. And this is the actual lodging itself. This is where guests stay. And so maybe you might be thinking that a temple lodging, you've got this image of it being a very old building, and there are some other temple lodgings on Mount Koya that are a little bit older and maybe feel a bit more traditional, but that comes at a price as well. It means drafty, cold, and a little bit rickety, and usually not with a toilet in your room. But Renge-in has this wonderful balance of having this very old temple hall and a temple with lots of history, but with more modern comforts for the actual lodging part itself. Nice heating in the winter and a toilet in the room. Luxurious for Koya-san. And this temple has a long history. It was founded in the 9th century, but became especially important in the 17th century. When it became the family temple on Mount Koya of the Tokugawa family. And this is a hugely important family in Japanese history. Tokugawa Ieyasu, a member of this family, became what is known as the third of the 3 great unifiers in Japan. At the beginning of the 17th century, he united all of Japan under his control, beginning 250 years of peace, known as the Edo period. And just on these doors of the main hall here, you can make out that sign, the circle with the 3 leaves inside. This is the insignia of the Tokugawa family. So this was the kind of family temple on Koya, on Mount Koya, of this very, very important family in Japanese history. And actually in the temple's possession is the small portable Buddhist altar that Tokugawa Ieyasu himself used. A really precious item in this temple's collection. We're going to go inside the temple lodging now and we can show you the room, but before we're doing that we have to take off our shoes. So rather than you watching us fiddle around with our shoelaces for a few minutes, we'll see you inside.
Hello and welcome back. Now that we've adequately taken our shoes off, we've come indoors into the Shukubo, and as you can see, the first thing that might be quite unusual when you come indoors is that the rooms don't have any room numbers. So for example, my room today is the Sugi room. This means cedar. The room next door is called Hinoki, cypress. So at this particular Shukubo, the Renge-in, all of the rooms are named after different types of trees, which is quite nice. And so tonight I'm going to be staying at Sugi, and what I'd like to do is take you inside to do a quick room tour of what you might expect from a Shukubo. So as I open the door, the first thing to note, which a lot of people do miss, is the small step. So normally what you do is when you check in, you take your shoes off, you grab the slippers, and you can come up, leave your slippers behind, and take a step into your room. So do come in, and this is the room for me tonight. The room is... well, I guess the first thing you might notice about the room is the flooring itself. This is the tatami flooring. And then you've got a table with a tea set, for example, a small zabuton cushion, and the amenities that you might expect from a lodging, a fridge, kettle, etc. And then just here on the wall attached is an air conditioning remote control. And that controls air conditioning unit just up at the top here. So you can set it to hot when it's cold and vice versa. But the one thing you might be wondering in this very quaint room is, where on earth am I going to be sleeping tonight? Well, I'm not going to be sleeping on the table, that's for sure. But just over here, if I just open this door, is a couple of mattresses, pillows, etc., sheets. So what will happen is when we go down for dinner, a staff member will come up here and then they'll take out the futon mattresses and set up the bedding for you, so that when you come back after dinner, you've got the bedding ready for you to take a nap or a sleep, whatever you prefer. And then what I'd like to do is just bring you over here to show you the toilet. And so one unusual thing about this particular temple lodging is that, well, in most of the ones in Koyasan, you don't have a toilet, that's shared, and you don't have a bathing space either, that's also shared. But the great thing about this place is that you do get your own toilet. But you may have noticed that there's really nowhere to shower or to bathe. So there is a public bathing area downstairs in this Shukubo. But I do highly recommend it. It's an amazing experience to use one of these public baths. And so all of the Shukubos in this area also have a public bathing area. So it's just something to keep in mind if you do want to come and stay here. And that's my room. So I'm quite hungry now, so I'm going to go down to eat. So I'll catch you downstairs. Bye.
Okay, now it's time for the thing that I've been really looking forward to, and a real highlight of any stay at a Shukubo temple lodging, and that's dinner. And dinner is a traditional shojin ryori, which means Buddhist vegetarian-style cuisine. Shojin ryori literally means like a food for enlightenment. And it's a really quite big meal. And a lot of people ask me, is this what the monks eat every day? And no, they don't. It's kind of a special occasion Buddhist food, the kind of Shingon equivalent of a Christmas dinner. Let's have a look at what's on the menu. So shojin ryori, it involves a kind of system of fives. So there are 5 different methods that are used in the creation of the food. So for example, boiled, steamed, fried, raw, and fermented. And also 5 different colors, such as green, black, white, and so on. And then 5 different tastes, such as bitter and sweet and umami, that kind of savory flavor. And this number 5, it's important because there are 5 precepts that people take in Buddhism. So this number has a significance as well. Looking in more detail at what we have to eat, there's a kind of hot pot just here. This is a kind of tofu and vegetable hot pot in a soy milk broth. And then this is a very famous item on Mount Koya. This is called Gomadofu, sesame tofu. Although it doesn't actually contain any tofu at all. It's actually made from sesame paste, but it has the same texture as tofu. And then this is the simmered dish, and also a different type of tofu in here called Koya tofu, Mount Koya tofu, a kind of freeze-dried tofu. Some nice fruit. This interesting item here is a type of ginger, wild ginger, called myoga, and a lovely seasonal chestnut just here as well. We've got the lovely selection of vegetable tempura with a dipping sauce, and usually this type of dipping sauce contains a kind of fish broth, but because it's a vegetarian cuisine, this is just a broth made using only kombu seaweed. You've got a couple of different pickled dishes just here, and then this is a kind of imitation meat in here, which has a delightfully kind of gingery flavor. And then in here, we've got a kind of vegetable steamed dumpling. I have some mushrooms as well. And then also a soup dish with a kind of, it's called fu, which is a kind of wheat gluten. And then here, of course, you have a bowl empty at the moment for your rice, and a teacup for tea, although I have got myself a beer. You might think that Buddhist cuisine should be kind of teetotal, but actually even during Kukai's time, even during the 9th century, he allowed monks on Mount Koya to have just a little bit of alcohol, 1 cup of sake a day, because it's so cold on Mount Koya, especially in the winter. And they called this hanyato, wisdom water. But today I've got what people call bubbly wisdom water, a nice refreshing beer for with dinner. And so now we're ready to eat. So we've got the lighter here, and we can light our fire underneath this tofu hot pot, and that just takes just a few minutes to cook, and it'll be ready to eat. So we're going to enjoy our lovely dinner here now, and tomorrow morning the head priest here has very kindly given us permission to film a part of the morning ceremony. So we won't be able to talk or appear on camera during that, but you can enjoy a few minutes in just a moment of the very special atmosphere of the morning ceremony. See you then. It's now about 6:30 in the morning, and we're just moving along the corridor which connects the Shukubo lodging part of Rengein Temple to the main hall where we'll attend the morning ceremony. Just before that, we'll meet the head priest, and he'll introduce himself and the temple. The morning ceremony lasts for about 25 minutes, and the head priest kindly gave us permission to film a part of it. It's quite long, so we'll just show you a clip now of just a minute or two of the morning ceremony for you to get a taste of the special atmosphere that you can experience attending a Buddhist ceremony just as the sun rises. I hope you enjoy it.
This statue is Kobo Daishi. Kobo Daishi is our master, and this temple was built by him. And in the 15th century, this temple was Tokugawa family's temple. And this place is very special. Please enjoy.
Hello and welcome back. So Richard and I are currently standing on this path with the towering cedar trees that lead up to Okunoin. And Okunoin in English literally means the temple in the far distance. And so what I'd like to do, along with Richard, is take you down this path to the temple and give you a quick introduction about the history of this place. So in the virtual tour so far, we've spoken quite a lot about Kukai. And just here on the right hand side is one of many statues of Kukai that line this path and are also dotted around this area. And I don't know if you can make it out, but in the right hand on this statue is the ritualistic instrument that I was talking about earlier called the Vajra, the one that he threw from the port in China that landed here in Japan. And that the idea was that wherever that instrument lands is where he builds this monastic temple complex. And lo and behold, it was lodged in that pine tree that we were talking about earlier in the tour. And as we continue down this path, when we get to Okunoin, there is actually a mausoleum there as well. And within that mausoleum are the remains of Kukai. And it is believed that rather thinking of Kukai as having passed away, actually Kukai is said to be in an internal state of meditation. And so what that really means is that he's effectively still with us today. And it is believed that in approximately 5.67 billion years into the future, a future Buddha called Maitreya in Sanskrit is said to come to Earth to save the lives of human beings. And it is believed that at that point, Kukai will then reawaken to sort of lend a hand, provide some support in order to help save those lives. And because the idea of Kukai being in this state of meditation is so deeply ingrained, the temple here actually prepares 2 meals per day for Kukai to enjoy during his meditation.
Yes, and Kukai, in his eternal meditation, is quite an early riser. He's served his breakfast very, very early, before the sun rises, and has his lunch around mid-morning. And these days, the menu that Kukai is served is quite modern. He's apparently served quite often the Japanese-style curry and rice, which definitely wouldn't have been on the menu in Heian period Japan in the 9th century when he was alive, or before he entered his eternal meditation. But apparently he seems to be quite fond of it these days. And so, yes, this Okunoin, it's essentially a very large cemetery or graveyard. And actually this path from the entrance right the way through to Kukai's mausoleum is around 2 kilometers, really quite long. So we've kind of started from just over halfway through today, because it takes at least half an hour or so to walk the whole length. And talking of Kukai, here's another quite different style of depiction of Kukai from the one that we just saw, wearing makeup in this very cute statue. So actually people have in recent times regarded this statue as a very beautiful looking version of Kukai, and so especially young women come and apply makeup to his face as a kind of prayer, asking that they become as beautiful as this lovely cute statue of Kukai. And so this 2 kilometer path through Okunoin goes through these cedar trees, and this is the older section of Okunoin, which evolved when people started basically offering or arranging for their ashes or remains to be interred in this area after their death, in the hope that they could be close to Kukai, and therefore in the vicinity when Kukai reawakened from his eternal meditation, when Maitreya arrives in this world, and they can kind of join the Buddhist party that will happen then. And so this is how Okunoin kind of grew, starting just with people having their ashes interred in the very close vicinity to Kukai's mausoleum, but of course the more people that wanted to do that, the more the area had to expand. But actually in recent times it's expanded even further from this kind of old section with these cedar trees, and to the right, I mean you can't really see it, all of the lovely trees are in the way, but there's a whole other section of Okunoin where people are still being interred now. New graves are being made, and that section also has a lot of company graves. So there are big companies in Japan. For example, Okunoin has a grave for the Panasonic electronics company, and if people wish they can have a part of their remains interred there after their death, but can also have their own grave, a family grave, for example, in their hometown. So I'm not sure how popular you find the idea of being spending the rest of eternity with your co-workers, but in Japan there seem to be plenty of people that are okay with that idea.
And so, speaking of graves, as we're walking down this path, you might notice very different styles of gravestones. And so some of the more common ones, so for example the ones here just on the left, for example, are those sort of rectangular shaped gravestones. And those styles of gravestones are quite common across Japan, across many of the sects in Buddhism as well. But the one that's quite unique to Shingon Buddhism is this one just coming up here. And this one is called a Gorinto, and you can see that the shape is quite unique. And it's actually split into 6 different elements. Now, when you look at this, you might be counting right now at the screen thinking, well, hang on, Robert doesn't really know how to count. There's only 5 sections to this gravestone. But just bear with me while I explain each part. So at the very bottom, you've got this cube-shaped fixture, and that is meant to represent earth, followed by a spherical fixture above it to represent water, and then above that, sort of this almost pointed triangular shape to represent fire, and then beyond that, it's air, then at the very top, space. That's 5, and all together, combined, is the element of consciousness. And so this is one of the very strong symbols of Shingon Buddhism.
One thing that you'll find a lot of in this older section of Okunoin is graves of very famous Japanese historic figures. Lots of feudal lords, warlords, and daimyo, which means a feudal lord of old domains, have their family graves here. And especially Japanese people who are very familiar with Japanese history, have learnt about it in junior high school and high school, will look very carefully at the names that are displayed in front of each of these graves, because they're like, that's so-and-so who did the battle of so-and-so, and so on. Lots of very famous people have graves here from Japanese history. One thing that I find very interesting about Buddhism in Japan is how much it has changed especially in the last 150 years. So one very important date in the history of modern Japanese Buddhism is 1872. And this was just 4 years after a pivotal moment in Japanese history, the Meiji Restoration, the beginning of Japan's modern period, and the opening of Japan to the rest of the world after a 250 period of seclusion. And along with that kind of change in government came a rapid modernization of Japan, and a law passed in 1872 called the Nikujiki Saitai Law. And I love what this means in English. It's the monastic meat-eating and marriage law. And at this point, the government said that from this point onwards, Buddhist priests in Japan are able to eat meat, and also they are able to get married. And this had quite big ramifications for Buddhism in Japan. So although we had last night the Shojin Ryori, the Buddhist-style vegetarian cuisine, and this is still served to all guests at temple lodgings in Koya-san now. But actually, in their private lives, for the priests, if they want to go out at night for a cheeky hot dog, that's fine actually now. They are permitted to eat meat. Although some priests choose not to do so still. But the vast majority will actually eat meat at certain times. But then the really big ramification, the really big change that had wide-reaching effects on the practice of Buddhism in Japan was the clerical marriage part of the law. And so from the late 19th century, Buddhist priests in Japan started to marry. And so that, of course, meant that they also started having children. And that, of course, meant that they wanted to pass on temples to their children. So from that point onwards began this system in Japan of hereditary temple ownership. So what happens now is that priests at temples in Japan, such as the temple lodgings, all of these temple lodgings on Mount Koya, they will be trying very hard to have a son. Unfortunately, it really has to be a son rather than a daughter. And then they will go to Koya-san High School. It will be the usual system. And then they go to Koya-san University, both of which are located here on Mount Koya. And then after graduating from Koya-san University, they will enter the Kongobuji, the main temple on the mountain, complete a number of years of quite rigorous training, and then will graduate and become a Buddhist priest, and then take over the temple from their father, who can now happily retire. So this has become now the standard way that temples and temple ownership operates in Japan now, really quite different to what the situation was pre-19th century.
So as we just pass through this path here, in front of us you can probably see a bridge that crosses a small stream, and then in the distance a building. And so today we won't be crossing that bridge with the camera, because it is believed that once you cross that bridge you enter that sacred site where Kukai is meditating. And so we're not allowed to cross the bridge and film or take photographs. And that's something to note as well if you were to come and visit Mount Koya, that you're not able to cross that bridge and take pictures. But I just wanted to make a note about that building that we can see in the distance. So that is quite a famous lantern hall. And a lot of people would come to this lantern hall and make a donation of a lantern to this place. And some of these lanterns date back centuries. So for example, one of the oldest lanterns that is still lit even today dates back to 1088, and even that lantern was actually donated by an emperor, Emperor Shirakawa, And there are actually quite a number of lanterns in there, also donated by sort of similar ranking people, like emperors, for example. And so we can't go in, but I certainly do recommend, if you come and visit, to have a look inside. And then beyond that lantern hall is the mausoleum itself for Kukai. But for now, what we'll do is we'll just veer off to the right here, and you might be able to notice these there's sort of a line of statues that people are essentially splashing a lot of water on. So on a hot summer's day, I'm sure they find it incredibly refreshing. But these statues as a group are called Mizumuke Jizor. And what that literally means is Mizumuke, water facing, and then Jizor, the deities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly show you how to pray to these statues. So what you can do is, just over here, you can see that there's essentially a trough of water. You just pick up a ladle, fill it up with water, and you may have noticed a lot of people giving it a big full splash, like so. And actually, whilst most people do this, it's probably not the correct way of doing it. Apparently, the sort of the correct way to do it is to do it slightly more gently at the base of the statue or at the feet of the statue, like so. Being very careful as well to return the ladle as such. And the idea behind this style of prayer is that essentially what you're doing is you're praying for the deceased that are very close to you. And whilst we call them as a whole or as a group the Jizor, there are actually lots of different deities here. So for example, this one here that's quite glamorously decorated in the golden crown is the Dainichi Nyorai. And Dainichi Nyorai is the famous Buddha in Shingon Buddhism. And you can see in the palm of the statue as well is that Gorinto that we were speaking about earlier, the image of the gravestone with the 6 elements, or rather 5 separate, but 6 in total. And then, of course, right next to Dainichi Nyorai is Richard's most favourite deity of them all.
Yes, this deity is called Fudo Myo, and he's very commonly found in esoteric Shingon Buddhism. And he's very easy to recognize with his flaming halo that burns through delusions, and his sword that cuts our attachments, and then his rope that he holds that binds those attachments once he's cut them off. A really awesome deity.
Excellent. So what we'll do now is then just quickly turn to the right here to see the sort of open area of the temple complex. And as we walk across here, you might notice quite a large building in the distance. And again, we can't really go right in front of that building to film. But that building is where you can pick up a Goshiwin. And a Goshiwin is essentially a mark of the temple. So a stamp and a bit of calligraphy that represents the temple. And people can collect these from temples around the country. And a lot of people do it as part of a pilgrimage as well, and collect them in a book called a Goshiwincho. And Richard actually has one with him that he'd like to show everybody. So I'll just pass the mic over to Richard as well.
Thank you. Yes, it's show and tell time. So I have a Goshiwincho, a pilgrim stamp book here, related to a very famous pilgrimage route in Japan that also has a relation to Koya-san, to Mount Koya. And I completed this pilgrimage last year. And this pilgrimage is often called the Shikoku 88 Temple Pilgrimage. And it's basically a route of 88 temples around the circumference of Shikoku Island, the smallest of Japan's 4 main islands. But it's still quite a big island. That route is about 1,200 kilometers, and completing it the traditional way, which is on foot, takes a good 6 to 8 weeks. And when people do that pilgrimage, they wear a pilgrim's jacket like this. This is my jacket. And then on the back, it has this phrase, the big characters down the middle, Namu Daishi Henjo Kongo. And what this means is, I put my faith in Kukai, in Kobo Daishi, who of course is interred here in the mausoleum. And then these smaller characters just here say Do-gyo ni nin, which means two people practicing together. And so the reason why this pilgrimage route is so closely associated with Mount Koya and with Kukai is because Kukai was born in Shikoku, actually at one of the temples on that pilgrimage route. And it's said that Kukai himself established that 88 temple pilgrimage route. And people believe that when you walk that route, you're walking together with Kukai. He joins you because he's not dead. He's still in his eternal meditation and therefore able to join you and help you on your route. And so when people are traveling between those temples, they wear these jackets, and when they pray at the temples, they wear this. This is called a wagesa, and this is basically a very abbreviated version of a Buddhist temple, a Buddhist monk's robes. And so people wear them like this when they visit the temple. But there's certain etiquette that you need to follow when wearing one of these. So for example, if you visit the bathroom, which is considered to be an impure place, then you should take it off. And temples along the route outside the bathrooms even have little hooks that you can hang your wagesa on while you visit and perform your ablutions. And then when you're doing your worship at the temple itself, you use one of these. This is called a juzu, which is a kind of Buddhist rosary. But rather than counting the beads, you hold the rosary like this, and when praying, you rub it together in your hands, and the beads make a very nice sound. And then after you've performed your worship at the temple, that's when this book comes into play, the Goshiwincho, the temple stamping book. And so this is a special one specific to Shikoku, and it has 88 pages, one for each temple. And so at each temple, you take this book to the office, you pay 300 yen, just a couple of pounds, and get this beautiful calligraphy inscribed in your book, and also these red stamps. This one's a very beautiful example of the calligraphy. And then the reason why this is also related to Mount Koya is because this very final page was the final page completed in my book, because it's traditional, having completed that pilgrimage, to then come here to say thank you to Kukai for accompanying you on your journey and keeping you safe. And so that was the very last place I visited, and I got my book signed at the office just over there about a year ago. And so actually it's quite common to see people wearing their pilgrim's jackets and wearing their wagesa in this area. And actually just over there, probably getting their book signed after having completed the pilgrimage. Maybe you can just make out with their white jacket. Well done to them. They have completed their pilgrimage and are getting their final page signed. Well, I hope you've enjoyed joining Robert and myself on this walk through Mount Koya. Actually, not just myself and Robert, but also maybe three of us, maybe also joined by Kukai, Dogyo Sannin. And I really hope you can come to Mount Koya. It's one of my favorite destinations in Japan. I know Robert feels the same way. It's one of the destinations included on our Hidden Japan small group tour. But it's also very easy to incorporate into one of our tailored self-guided trips. For example, both Kyoto and Osaka are really quite close by to Mount Koya, just a couple of hours journey here. And so any journey, any trip to Japan that includes a visit to either Osaka or Kyoto, it's also very easy to incorporate a one-night stay on Mount Koya, and something I really recommend. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you in Japan very soon.